It's Ash Wednesday, which is the beginning of Lent. Lent is the passion and resurrection and crucifixion of Jesus. So let's talk about death and what it means for dyslexics. I'm Tyler Friend, and this is the Daily Dyslexic. Dietrich Bonhoeffer said that when Jesus calls a man, he bids him come and die. And that dude meant it. He was a Lutheran pastor in Germany in a bad time to be a Lutheran pastor in Germany. It was World War II. He was eventually, captured by the Gestapo and went to, I think, 2 different prison camps where he was eventually, I made up that word, dyslexia. And he was eventually sentenced without witnesses by just one guy to death. And he died because of it. He was hung, and new evidence is coming out that he was likely hung and then taken down and then revived and then hung again, probably multiple times. It was a rough way to go. We're talking about Lent and Jesus and the Passion. I think the only group of people that comes close to the Romans in executions were probably the Nazis. So what am I saying? Is that what we're called to? Gotta go die harshly?
Then Jesus told his disciples, "If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his soul? Or what shall a man give in return for his soul?"
Okay, take up a cross, follow me, come and die. How? Like, I don't want, what? Do I go to a persecuted area and just announce myself as Christian there? Like, is that how I come and die? I don't think so. What else does Jesus have to say about it?
You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. This is the first commandment. And a second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these 2 commandments depend all the law and the prophets.
So is that how we bear our cross, as Jesus would say? Or, Jordan Peterson, he's big into that sentence. I don't know. But I found this interesting little quote from Walter Brueggemann. So take a listen to this.
It is the crucifixion of Jesus that is the decisive criticism of the royal consciousness. The crucifixion of Jesus is not to be understood simply in good liberal fashion as the sacrifice of a noble man, nor should we too quickly assign a cultic priestly theory of atonement to the event. Rather, we might see in the crucifixion of Jesus the ultimate act of prophetic criticism in which Jesus announces the end of a world of death and takes that death into his own person. Therefore, we say that the ultimate criticism is that God himself embraces the death that his people must die. The criticism consists not standing over against, but in standing with. The ultimate criticism is not one of triumphant indignation, but one of passion and compassion that completely and irresistibly undermine the world of competence and competition. The contrast is stark and total. This passionate man set in the midst of numb Jerusalem. And only the passion can finally penetrate the numbness.
No matter what I do, no matter how many English degrees I earn, no matter how much effort I put into reading, I can't glue the letters to the page. I can't make them sit still. And I can't for the life of me recognize the word "the." I skip it constantly. I think I skip it more than I recognize it as existing. I don't really understand why it exists. It also doesn't correlate to anything in, I'm going to say, real life. If you hear the word apple, you think of an apple or a product, with an Apple logo on it. The word "the," picture it in your head. It's just symbols. It doesn't represent any real physical object. So I don't recognize the word. Anyway, I'm on a tangent. My point is that I respond in my life to a certain lack of competence in one albeit crucial area called reading by trying to get competitive And like all of my teachers growing up were like, they wanted to put me in the special class, or like they actually just called me the worst names you could think of. I did not go to a school in a good area. And I eventually just had to decide for myself, like, okay, you say I'm stupid. I don't feel stupid. I don't feel dumb. I don't think I am. I'm going to not believe anything you say and watch me learn every single thing I can about this stupid English language. And then I did, and no one cares. You know what I mean? And it's this kind of life that Jesus calls us to die from. That's what I think in part he is talking about. We don't have to overcompensate for our inadequacies. He is enough. Does that make sense? Here's another quote from Walter Brueggemann. It's really good. Listen to this.
The cross is the ultimate metaphor of prophetic criticism because it means the end of the old consciousness that brings death on everyone. The crucifixion articulates God's odd freedom, his strange justice, and his peculiar power. It is the freedom, justice, and power which break the power of the old age and bring it to death. Without the cross, prophetic imagination will likely be as strident and as destructive as that which it criticizes. The cross is the assurance that effective prophetic criticism is done not as outsider, but always by one who must embrace the grief, enter into death, and know the pain of the criticized one.
Dyslexia, in our academic institutional understanding of it, is phonological. And I just don't think that that's all that it is, especially because dyslexia usually comes with a co-occurrence. Speaking of our academic understanding of dyslexia, they call these co-occurrences comorbidities because I guess dyslexia is a death sentence and they don't understand how words work, which is ironic because we're the ones who have trouble with them. That's what dyslexia means, by the way. What I'm trying to say is that dyslexia isn't a death sentence. It's not. Sometimes it does feel like one. Like a lot of, there's a lot of negative statistics with it, is what I'm trying to say. And sometimes there's, premature unaliving associated with it. And it's this conflict that doesn't need to exist in Jesus, with Jesus. Especially just take the reality of dyslexia for instance. Like, it's not all negative. 40% of all self-made millionaires are dyslexic. Half the people that work at NASA are dyslexic. In Massachusetts, they call dyslexia the MIT disease. It's not all bad, and there's so many positives with the dyslexic processing style. It's not all just, oh, I can't read good and my teachers don't understand me. Like, that's not all that it is. It doesn't have to end in a negative statistic, someone going to prison because they got off track when they were a kid because they didn't get the help or attention that they needed. Like, it doesn't have to be that. That's not the story that it has to be. Like, here's the thing. Like, it's a stat that I don't think a lot of people want to talk about, but like, on average, dyslexics have 5% bigger brains. Like, I know that's rude. We don't want to talk about intelligence because we can't do anything about it, but it's true. And my point is that I think the world would be better served if dyslexics were doing their dyslexic thing. And I think following Jesus, yoking ourselves to him, helps us accomplish that mission because we live in a text-centric world and it's quickly moving toward a hyper-text-centric world. Like, everything we do is based on text since the Enlightenment. Every book is basically points back to the Bible. Like, I know that's an audacious statement, but I don't want to spell it out right now. The Bible was the first book like printed, and it changed the world. It created a revolution, all this stuff. And we wouldn't have printed books without that book. Like, that's the reason why the printing press was invented. And that might be hyperbolic. I'm sure there were other reasons, but you know what I'm trying to say. People that don't understand dyslexia, that hold people with dyslexia back in school or disregard them entirely or misunderstand them in employment circumstances are wrong. There you go. Someone needs to say it. They're wrong for doing that. And we need our best and brightest people working on our biggest problems. We don't need people on the left hysterically screaming that there are problems, and we don't need people on the right ignoring problems. I know both of those are hyperbolic statements. It's okay. What we need is competent, creative, highly functioning people. And that just describes dyslexics to a T. So that's part of what we're trying to do here. And I think the best way to accomplish creative work in the world is to try and live up to the Great Commission. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and strength. Both the hardships and the benefits of dyslexia are included in that command. Dyslexic people need to create and innovate the way that non-dyslexic people need to consume. That's just what I believe. It might be kind of a rude way of saying it, but words is hard. What would happen when we would offer those parts of ourselves as dyslexics to God? What can God do with the most creative people on the planet? That's what I'm asking. One more thing Jesus said.
Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light.
You can't be at your dyslexic best when you're stressed out and panicked. And that happens a lot because there's PTSD associated with dyslexia, which is so silly. I understand, we're going through a phase right now in the West of like, oh, I have this thing and I have this thing and da 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 da. We all have hardships. Yes, that's not what I'm harping on right now. What I'm trying to say is that I can attest to countless dumb decisions because I was panicked and stressed because I didn't know myself well enough and I didn't know how my maker saw me. So knowing those things will help with the creative work that God calls us to in fulfilling the Great Commission. Dyslexia is part of how I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Same for you if you have it. Lawrence Scupoli, I can't do the Italian thing. He was a Catholic priest who was basically wrongfully imprisoned for a while. He was eventually vindicated. And I think it's in the 1600s. I forgot to write the date down. My bad. There's not a ton of story on him out there. But he wrote some interesting things. And we're going to listen to something that he wrote right now.
A calm mind is a great asset in the life. Without it, your devotional life will not bear much fruit. If your heart is troubled, you are vulnerable to the enemy of the soul. When you are agitated, you are not able to make good decisions. You will stumble into snares. The enemy detests this peace in you. He knows this is the place where the Spirit of God dwells. That's why he devises such devilish ways to destroy peace. Avoid rash acts. Even if you are sure the Holy Spirit wants you to do something, wait. Put off doing it until your eagerness has declined. Introduced with that sort of self-control, a good work is more pleasing to God than if it were done too hastily. It is also necessary to overcome a certain inner regret. Sometimes we think our bad conscience is being generated by God, when in fact it is the work of the devil. Here's the way to tell. If your regret results in greater humility and increases your desire to serve God, receive it with gratitude as a gift from heaven. If it creates anxiety, makes you sad, depressed, fearful, and slow to do your duty, then we can be sure it has been suggested by the enemy. Disregard it.
So there you go. Is this a cohesive first episode of Daily Dyslexic? I don't know. I'm trying my best here. They're only going to get better. What I'm trying to say is take heart if you got dyslexia. I think it's a good thing. And I think it's okay for us to talk about how it impacts our lives negatively sometimes. It's a big deal. It is. I wake up some days and the words dance right off the page. I can't do anything about it. I can't make them stick there. And that's the whole point of the show. It's a Bible study dedicated for dyslexics. And that means something. It's not just about it's something that you can watch if you're dyslexic. Dyslexics have a different kind of way of processing reality. And we're going to get more into that as we go on. So, we're going to end every episode of the Daily Dyslexic with one of the Psalms or, Proverbs or other songs in the Bible, poetry. We're looking for poetry here. And we're going to kind of stick with one for the week. We're starting in the middle of the week this week. It's Wednesday, and the psalm that we're going to be looking at is Psalm 78. So we're just going to split it into 3 days because it's a long one. Anyway, give it a listen. Go ahead and do some meditating on it, and then I'll be right back here when we're done listening to it. Here we go.
Give ear, O my people, to my teaching. Incline your ears to the words of my mouth. I will open my mouth in a parable. I will utter dark sayings from of old, things that we have heard and known, that our fathers have told us. We will not hide them from their children, but tell to the coming generation the glorious deeds of the Lord and his might, and the wonders that he has done. He established a testimony in Jacob and appointed a law in Israel, when he commanded our fathers to teach their children, that the next generation might know them, the children yet unborn, and arise and tell them to their children, so that they should set their hope in God and not forget the works of God, but keep his commandments, and that they should not be like their fathers, a stubborn and rebellious generation, a generation whose heart was not steadfast, whose spirit was not faithful to God. The Ephraimites, armed with the bow, turned back on the day of battle. They did not keep God's covenant, but refused to walk according to his law. They forgot his works and the wonders that he had shown them.
All right, so we're going to end every episode of the Daily Dyslexic with a benediction. That's a fancy name. It means prayer. And before we do that, a couple YouTube notes. Please do all the YouTube things. This isn't the first YouTube video you've watched. You know what I'm asking you to do. Okay, on to the prayer. Hey, thank you for watching, and I'll be here tomorrow. Please come back. And here's to the adventure. Let's go.
The Lord bless and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you his peace.